The sun was merciless over Sagebrush Bend, where every step kicked up dust and every man had a past. Folks didn't talk much here, but they noticed when a banker in shiny boots rode into town, papers in hand and a smirk that could sour milk. Eli Rawlins didn't ask for trouble. He just wanted to keep to himself, tend to the land his late wife loved, and let the world spin on without him. But when that banker claimed Eli owed a debt he never signed, and that his land was up for grabs, something old stirred in the cowboy's bones. They said the records were lost, the sheriff didn't care, and the well ran dry overnight. Coincidence? Eli didn't think so. Not when his barn creaked like it was being watched, and not when the same banker had ruined other honest men before. But Eli had one thing no one counted on: a buried secret in the rafters, and a quiet understanding of the law most folks forgot. And sometimes, when a man's been quiet long enough, folks forget just how loud he can be when he finally stands up. Will one cowboy outsmart a greedy empire before the land gets swallowed whole? Hit that subscribe button and share this tale with anyone who still believes grit can outlast gold. The wind whistled through Sagebrush Bend like it always did come late summer, dry as bone and hot enough to peel paint from the church steeple. Eli Rawlins stood on his front porch, one hand resting on the rail, the other wrapped around a tin mug of weak coffee. The horizon shimmered where his pasture met the sky, and a mule brayed somewhere behind the barn. He took a slow sip, not because he liked the taste, Lord knew he didn't, but because it was what he did every morning since Maybelle passed. Habit had become his last companion. A plume of dust rose on the road, distant but deliberate. Eli narrowed his eyes, the lines around them folding deeper into weathered skin. Visitors were rare out this far, and ones that stirred up that much dust usually meant trouble or taxes. He set the cup down, wiped his hands on his shirt, and waited. The man who stepped down from the buggy was polished and perfumed, a feathered hat band on his Stetson and boots that had never seen real dirt. He moved like someone who liked being watched. The buggy bore the crest of First Territorial Bank. Eli recognized it from the time he'd tried to refinance the place, back when Maybelle was sick. "Mr. Eli Rawlins," the man called, stepping across the cracked yard like he owned it. Eli didn't move. "That's my name." The man tipped his hat in a mock show of courtesy. "Curtis Delancey, Regional Acquisitions. I'm here on behalf of the bank regarding your land." "Don't reckon I've missed any payments," Eli said, voice calm but flinty. Curtis smiled like a man who'd practiced it. "It ain't about payments, sir. It's about closure." He pulled a rolled document from his leather case and let it unfurl. "Seems there was an outstanding lien from 1889, something your late wife signed when her uncle passed the deed down. Now I know it's been a few years, but the debt's still valid, plus interest." Eli took a slow step forward, reading the paper from where he stood. He didn't touch it. "That lien was cleared. Paid off when we planted oats in '94. Got the receipt somewhere." Curtis shrugged, unconcerned. "Well, the record says otherwise. And unless you can provide proof by the end of the week, I'm afraid the bank's going to have to reclaim this property. 7 days, Mr. Rawlins. That's more than fair." "Fair's a word men like you like to twist," Eli said, his voice still quiet. "This land's been in my family since before Arizona had stars on the flag. My wife died here. I'll be damned if I let a pen and a snake's smile take it from me." Curtis didn't flinch. "I'll give you until sundown next Saturday. After that, you'll be trespassing on bank land. Good day, sir." Eli watched him climb into the buggy and ride off like he had somewhere important to be. The dust rose again and vanished. Inside the house, Eli opened the old chest at the foot of the bed. Maybelle's trunk, still smelling faintly of cedar and old lavender. He sifted through folded quilts, yellowed letters, a Bible with his name and hers inked side by side. Nothing yet. But she was smart. Smarter than him when it came to paper and law. If there was something worth finding, she would have left it. He stood in the doorway of the barn, eyes traveling up to the rafters. High above, where the boards met in a crisscross of timber and age, something caught the light, a rusted tin can wedged behind the beam. His heart knocked against his ribs like a hoof on hollow wood. He grabbed a ladder. Inside that can, he found a rolled parchment, edges brittle, but intact. A map drawn in Maybelle's careful hand. A creek marked in blue, a boundary sketched in ink. And next to it, in her cursive, Spring Line, verified 1887 claim. Keep safe. Eli blinked hard, dust in his eye or maybe something else. He hadn't known it then, but Maybelle had left him more than memories. She'd left him a chance. The sun had barely cleared the butte when Eli spotted the first sign of trouble. A stretch of his east fence lay flat, posts sawed clean and wire scattered like snapped ribbon. He knelt beside one of the cuts, fingers brushing the wood. Clean edge, sharp tool. This wasn't the wind or wild hogs. It was a message. By the time he got to the well, the message turned into a threat. The water smelled off, bitter and sharp, like rust and medicine. He dropped a bucket, drew it up, and gagged at the stink. Something oily floated on top, shimmering in the light. The well, the only drinkable source for miles, had been poisoned. Eli stared at it, jaw tight. "So that's how they're gonna play it," he muttered. From the ridge behind the pasture, a voice called out, "Mr. Rawlins!" He turned to see a boy in a dusty cap scrambling down the slope. Noah Murphy, no more than 11, the oldest son of his late friend Pete. The kid ran with urgency, holding a small slingshot in one hand and waving with the other. "They was snooping again," Noah gasped when he reached him, breathing hard. "Two men came down by the creek. One of them had a ledger. I think they was measuring something." Eli rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You sure it was near the bend?" "Yes, sir, by that split cottonwood. I watched 'em from the rocks." Eli nodded. "Good eyes, Noah, and a good head. You tell your ma I said thanks for letting you help an old man." The boy grinned, proud, before running back the way he came. Alone again, Eli turned back to the poisoned well. He'd seen this kind of pressure before, slow, steady, and just legal enough to keep the law blind. Curtis Delancey wasn't just waving paper around, he was tightening the noose. Back in the house, Eli rummaged through the trunk again. He needed proof, something to cut through Curtis's lies. Maybelle's old tin of deeds and letters had been tucked deep under quilts. He opened it carefully, the scent of age and lavender hitting him like a memory. Inside were tax receipts, old seed orders, even the letter from the Land Bureau when their marriage grant had been finalized. No lien, no unpaid debt, but nothing that could overturn a forged document either. His hands paused on a sealed envelope, yellowed at the corners, with handwriting he didn't recognize. He turned it over. On the back, in Maybelle's tidy script, "From Simon, in case of trouble." Simon, that was Martha's brother, a quiet man who worked in Prescott's land office years back. Died young in a barn fire, if Eli remembered right. But if he'd written something and Maybelle had saved it, he set it gently in his shirt pocket. By midday, he hitched the mule and rode into town. The streets of Sagebrush Bend were quieter than usual. Folks watched him pass from shaded porches but didn't wave. Curtis's buggy sat outside the sheriff's office, its wheels too clean for a place this dusty. Eli rode past without slowing. He tied off near the schoolhouse where the bell had just rung for afternoon recess. Martha Caldwell stood at the porch, hair pinned back tight, spectacles perched low. She saw him and raised an eyebrow. "You're late for spelling, Mr. Rawlins." "Reckon I never learned to spell banker," he said, handing her the envelope. She read the front, her smile fading. "Simon's writing. I haven't seen this since—" She looked up at him, eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" "Curtis Delancey's trying to steal my land with fake papers, and I figure my wife left me this for a reason." Martha slipped the envelope into her apron. "Come back after class. I'll read it with fresh eyes." As children laughed in the yard behind them, Eli tipped his hat and walked off. The sun hung low now, casting long shadows across the street, and in his gut, a slow burn was starting, the kind that didn't come from fear. It came from purpose. When Eli returned that evening, Martha was waiting with the envelope open and her face pale. "He found something, Eli, and it's bigger than you think." She handed him the letter, and with it, the first piece of the puzzle that might just save everything. Eli sat across from Martha at her worn kitchen table, the envelope open between them like a wound finally revealed. The lamplight flickered off the glass of her spectacles, and she read the letter again, slower this time. Outside, Crickets chirped, and the distant rumble of a freight train echoed off the canyon walls. "It's a certified survey," Martha murmured, tapping the yellowed paper. "Done by the Territory Land Office. Simon signed it himself. This seal proves it." Eli leaned forward. "Read me that part again about the spring." She adjusted her glasses. "According to the 1887 Arizona Water Use Charter, any land found to contain a permanent natural spring may be granted extended water rights, so long as it was claimed before the rail expansion of 90. Says right here, subterranean spring, coordinates aligning with Homestead Parcel 4B. That's your land, Eli." Eli let out a slow breath. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the map Maybelle had drawn, unfolding it with care. He laid it beside the survey. The lines matched. The spring sat dead center of the old pasture where the cottonwoods split near the creek, exactly where Curtis's men had been measuring. "You think he knows?" Eli asked. Martha pressed her lips into a line. "I think Curtis isn't the kind of man who walks blind. He's got someone feeding him pieces." Eli nodded grimly. "He's moving fast, poisoning the well, tearing the fence. If he can't take it legal, he'll take it by ruin." "And the sheriff?" she asked. "Briggs won't cross him, not for me." Eli paused. "But if I've got a certified water claim, and Curtis's papers show a parcel that overlaps it." "Then he's claiming the wrong land," Martha said, her voice rising a touch. "And if he's already filed it—" "He's in violation," Eli finished. "Maybe even fraud." They sat in silence a moment, the weight of it all hanging in the air like a coming storm. "I need the original land ledgers," Eli said finally, "from the county seat in Cedar Bluff. They'll have the master survey, pre-railroad. If Curtis messed with township lines, it'll show there." Martha hesitated. "That's a full day's ride." "I'll take the mule," Eli said. "Don't reckon Curtis will expect it. And I trust that stubborn animal more than I do any man right now." He stood, folding the survey and slipping it carefully into his coat pocket. Martha touched his arm. "Be careful, Eli. You're not as invisible as you think." He gave a tired smile. "Ain't trying to be, just trying to stay free." By morning, he was already halfway to Cedar Bluff, following the old trail that weaved along the foothills. The sky was wide open, streaked with morning gold and the scent of sage. Every hoofbeat echoed with quiet purpose. The mule plodded steady, unbothered by the rocky path or the buzzards circling far overhead. Eli's mind worked with every mile. He thought of Maybelle, how she'd always been the one with the quiet ideas that turned into smart moves, how she'd insisted on keeping every paper, every receipt, even after he'd said it was just clutter. He thought of Curtis Delancey, all smiles and polish, wielding the law like a whip. And he thought of the spring, his spring, still flowing beneath dry ground, patient, waiting. Cedar Bluff came into view by dusk, nestled between two red mesas and dusted in a thin cloud of wind-blown grit. He tied off the mule behind the old feed store and made his way toward the records building, where he hoped truth hadn't yet been erased. Inside, the clerk barely looked up. "Closed in 10, he muttered. Eli laid down his hat and said softly, "Then you best point me to the township ledgers from 86 to 90. I won't take long." The clerk, sensing something in the cowboy's eyes he couldn't explain, rose without a word. As Eli flipped through the brittle pages of the ledger, his breath caught. Under his parcel number, a name had been scratched out, then rewritten in ink that wasn't quite dry. Who else had been here before him? And how far had Curtis's reach really spread? The smell of fried dough and wood smoke filled the air as Eli rode into Cedar Bluff's annual county fair, blending in like just another rancher come to admire blue-ribbon pies and overpriced saddles. The fairgrounds stretched across the edge of town, loud and colorful, all brass bands and laughing children. But Eli wasn't there for games or gossip. He had a ledger page tucked into his boot and a purpose burning low in his chest. The records building was locked up tight this time of day, its windows shuttered and the clerk likely off judging the pickled beet contest. But Eli had spent his youth hauling fence for Old Man Weller behind this very building. He remembered a loose slat behind the storage shed. Might still be loose, if luck hadn't turned fully against him yet. He tied off the mule beside the livestock pens and moved through the crowd like fog. A pie-eating contest was drawing cheers near the main tent. Folks were too distracted to notice one old cowboy slipping around the back of the record hall. The slat gave way with a gentle tug, just as it had 20 years ago. Eli eased inside, dust swirling in the sunlit beams that slipped through the cracks in the siding. The air was stale with paper and ink. He moved through the shelves with care, trailing his fingers along spines until he found what he'd come for: township ledgers, the master copies, heavy things bound in cracked leather, too large to carry out unnoticed. He flipped to the page he needed: Parcel 4B, his land. The original name written in fading ink: E. Rawlins, claim verified May 1887. Just beneath it, another name had been penciled in, then scratched out hard. The ink atop it, Curtis Delancey, in trust, was recent, sloppy, unofficial. Eli's mouth went dry. Curtis hadn't just filed a false claim. He'd tampered with the official record. "You're playing with fire now," Eli muttered under his breath. He scanned for any initials, any witness marks, and found a faint signature at the page's bottom right: S. Caldwell. Simon, Martha's brother. Again. Eli pulled out his notebook and carefully copied the page, including the faded signatures and the erasures. When he'd finished, he tucked the note back into his boot and replaced the ledger on the shelf exactly as he'd found it. He turned to leave and nearly walked straight into Sheriff Briggs. "Well," the sheriff drawled, chewing on a toothpick, "didn't expect to see you here, Rawlins. You ain't entered a chili cook-off I missed, have you?" Eli kept his face calm. "Didn't figure a man needed permission to look at public records." Briggs leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You do when the records building's locked. That's called trespassing." Eli shrugged. "And what's it called when someone rewrites government documents to steal a man's land?" Briggs's eyes flickered. "That's a heavy accusation, cowboy." Eli met his gaze without flinching. "So's locking up the innocent while thieves run free." The sheriff sighed. "Don't make trouble, Eli. This town ain't got room for grudges." Eli stepped past him. "I ain't making a grudge. I'm making a case." Briggs let him go, but the warning sat between them like an unsheathed knife. Back outside, the fair rolled on, children laughing, music playing. Judson Avery, an old rancher whose handshake could still crush bone, spotted Eli and ambled over. "Briggs giving you grief?" he asked, his voice like gravel dipped in molasses. Eli nodded. "Caught me poking where I wasn't supposed to be." Judson spit in the dirt. "You poking in Delancey's tracks?" Eli raised an eyebrow. "Thought so," Judson said. "That man's got his nose in everybody's dirt, but folks around here, we remember who built what and who just showed up with a gold watch and a snake's grin." He tipped his hat. "If it comes to it, Rawlins, you ain't alone." As the sun dipped behind the fairgrounds and Eli rode home, the wind tugged at his coat like a whisper. In his boot, the truth waited, and behind every booth and banner, it felt like something bigger had begun to stir. Eli Rawlins stood outside the Cedar Bluff land office just after dawn, coat collar turned up against the morning chill, boots caked with dust from the long ride back from the fairgrounds. The town was only beginning to stir, lamplight still burned behind curtained windows, and the bakery's chimney puffed out the smell of rising bread. But inside Eli's chest, the quiet burned like a fuse. He stepped through the land office door, nodding to the sleepy clerk behind the counter. "Need to file a water rights claim," he said, laying down the certified survey from Simon Caldwell and Maybell's map beside it. The clerk squinted at the paper, rubbed his jaw. "You're filing under Springwater law?" "That's right. Verified subterranean spring on Parcel 4B, claimed in May of 1887. Original survey, official seal." The clerk studied the signature, ran his finger across the faded ink, then slowly nodded. "Never seen one of these come through in years, but it's valid. Give me a minute." Eli waited while the man rummaged for forms, copied signatures, and stamped with practiced hands. As the last document was slid across the counter, Eli signed his name steady and slow. With that stroke of ink, he wasn't just defending his land anymore. He was staking it, legally, in a way Curtis Delancey couldn't erase. He left the office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The feeling didn't last. The smoke hit him before the smell. It was visible from halfway up the pass, black and angry, rising from the valley like a curse. Eli urged the mule into a hard trot, heart pounding faster with every bend in the trail. By the time he reached the homestead, flames had devoured half the barn. Sparks hissed in the dry grass. The air roared with heat. He dropped to the ground and ran, arms thrown over his face. The mule screamed from inside the stall. "Hold on, girl," Eli shouted, kicking open the burning gate. The rope snapped on the second tug, and the mule bolted, singed but alive. Eli stumbled back, coughing, as the barn collapsed behind him in a wave of sparks and groaning timber. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, wheezing, staring at what used to be his tools, his winter feed, and the last few pieces of Maybelle's old saddle. Ashes now. Footsteps crunched behind him. He turned slow, muscles tense, expecting another threat. Instead, it was Martha, apron still dusted in flour, her face pinched tight with worry. Behind her stood 3 other townsfolk, Noah's mother, old Judson, and a wiry carpenter named Harold Griggs, each carrying buckets, ropes, or shovels. "We saw the smoke from town," Martha said. "Didn't take much guesswork to know where it started." Eli stood, rubbing soot from his brow. "Delancey's men. This is their answer to the paperwork." Judson glanced at the rubble. "Ain't a subtle one." Harold dropped his bag. "You got water rights now. Means we got reason to help." Eli blinked. "You sure about that?" Martha stepped closer. "Curtis wants to break you, Eli. That means we either stand by and watch, or stand beside you." He didn't say thank you, not aloud, but the way his shoulders dropped, the way his breath slowed, it was there in the silence. They spent the afternoon digging out what could be salvaged. Harold rigged a makeshift roof over the mule's pen. Noah returned with extra feed, and Martha, after bandaging Eli's blistered hand, set to organizing supply lists with the precision of a schoolmarm running a winter festival. By sundown, the barn was gone, but something else had been built, quiet, strong, and rooted deep. Eli stood at the ridge to catch the last of the light, his jaw clenched as he scanned the distance. A single figure sat on horseback, still as stone on the next hill, Curtis's foreman, watching, smirking. Eli stared him down. This wasn't over. As the foreman turned and rode off, Eli felt the fire burn again, not in the wreckage behind him, but in his blood. They'd taken his barn, but they hadn't broken the man. The next morning, Eli was sweeping ash from the yard when the sound of hooves returned. Not the cautious trot of neighbors, but a calculated, law-bound clatter. Sheriff Briggs rode in flanked by 2 deputies, his badge polished like a warning sign. "Eli Rawlins," Briggs called, dismounting with a rustle of his long coat. "I'm here under orders from the territorial court." Eli straightened, jaw clenched, broom in hand. "What's this about?" Briggs pulled out a folded paper and read stiffly. "On suspicion of squatting, unlawful filing of a fraudulent water claim, and interference with county records, Curtis Delancey filed charges with the court yesterday afternoon." Eli's heart thudded once, deep and hard. "You mean he cried foul when someone finally played his own game?" "I don't make the law," Briggs said. "I enforce it." "No," Eli said evenly. "You just pick who it applies to." Briggs hesitated, then motioned to his men. "Let's go. You'll get your hearing before the judge." Martha had just arrived with fresh bread when the deputies shackled Eli's wrists. Her hands shook, bread forgotten. "This is wrong," she snapped. "You know it is, Briggs." Briggs didn't meet her eye. "He'll have his say." Eli looked at her. "Tell Judson, and bring the map to the hearing." She nodded, lips tight. The ride into town felt longer than usual. Folks stopped and stared as the wagon passed, some with pity, some with something colder. Curtis had gotten ahead of the story. That much was clear. Rumors travel faster than truth in towns like Sagebrush Bend. Inside the jail, the iron bars clicked shut behind Eli with a finality that gnawed at the back of his mind. The cell was small, barely wide enough to stretch his legs. The cot creaked when he sat, wood slats worn smooth by men who'd waited too long for justice. A voice came from the next cell. "Ain't the first good man to end up in there." Eli turned. A lean figure sat in the corner, dark eyes beneath a wide-brimmed hat. His face was lined, weathered with the kind of hurt that didn't speak unless asked. "Name's Tomas," the man said. "Used to run cattle west of the Salt Hills, before Curtis Delancey came knocking." Eli raised a brow. "He took your land too?" Tomas nodded. "Claimed my deed was forged. Paid off a clerk. When I spoke up, sheriff said I was trespassing on land that used to be mine. 2 days later, my barn burned. No proof. No help." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't ask questions but waits for trust. "I got a map," Eli said finally. "Water survey signed by Simon Caldwell. Delancey's claim doesn't match the township lines." Tomas's eyes lit slightly. "Simon? That boy was straight as fence wire. If he signed your land, it's real." "I aim to prove it at the hearing," Eli said, "if they'll listen." Tomas leaned closer. "Then you need more than paper. You need a witness. I remember the old township boundaries. Delancey's lies started with men like me, figured no one would care if we were brushed aside." "You'd testify?" Eli asked. "If it'll stop that vulture," Tomas said, "I'll stand in front of the judge myself." A beat passed between them, something like solidarity. 2 men chewed up by the same machine, still standing. That night, Eli lay on the cot staring at the rafters. The weight of the town, of Maybelle's memory, of Curtis's smirk, it all pressed down on him. But he also thought of Tomas's voice, steady and sure, and of Martha's hands, holding his map like it mattered. At sunrise, the deputy brought coffee and said the hearing would start by noon. Eli stood, brushed the dust from his coat, and looked through the bars toward the courthouse steps. Time to speak where everyone could hear. The town hall was packed by midday, the heat clinging to every beam and board like it meant to smother something. Folks had turned out in full, storekeepers in rolled-up sleeves, ranch hands still wearing trail dust, even Mrs. O'Reilly with her 2 lapdogs, fanning herself like it was Sunday sermon. Eli stood near the front, hands clasped behind his back, boots scuffed but spine straight. Beside him sat Martha and Tomas, quiet but firm. The courtroom wasn't much, just a few rows of benches, a raised platform where Judge Harrow sat like he'd rather be anywhere else, and a battered desk stacked with folders nobody had touched in years. Sheriff Briggs leaned near the back, eyes flicking between the crowd and Curtis Delancey, who stood with confidence too polished for a cattle town. His coat was pressed, tie too tight for the heat, and a smugness clung to him like cologne. Judge Harrow cleared his throat. "This hearing concerns conflicting land claims related to Parcel 4B, east of Sagebrush Bend. Mr. Delancey, you may proceed." Curtis stepped forward, unrolling a deed with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, this document reflects a lien defaulted upon in 1890 by the Rawlins family. The bank, of which I am trustee, acted within its rights to reclaim the land. Additionally, I have filed a claim on the property under expansion rights." The judge squinted. "You're saying you own it?" Curtis smiled. "I'm saying it belongs to the bank, and I represent the bank." Judge Harrow turned to Eli. "Mr. Rawlins, your response?" Eli nodded once and stepped up, pulling from his coat a folded set of documents. "Sir, I have here a certified water rights survey dated May 1887, signed by Simon Caldwell of the Territorial Land Office. It verifies a spring beneath Parcel 4B and grants me legal claim to that land under Arizona's 1887 charter. Furthermore, I have evidence that Mr. Delancey altered official ledgers, changing parcel records to benefit his own filing." A murmur rippled through the room. Curtis scoffed. Baseless accusations. Desperation from a man who knows he's trespassing. Eli didn't flinch. "I also have witness testimony." He turned to Tomas, who rose slowly, removing his hat as he stepped forward. His voice was low but carried. "I was run off my land by this same man. My original township deed overlaps his new filings. I saw the boundaries redrawn with my own eyes, witnessed them erased on the county map a year after I was evicted." Curtis laughed, a sharp bark. "This is ridiculous. Are we taking the word of a drifter over official documents?" "That drifter knows the land better than your suit knows a saddle," Judson called from the back. Laughter followed. Eli held up a small map, Maybelle's map, and laid it flat on the desk. This was drawn by my wife the year after we claimed the land. It matches the survey exactly. The spring sits square in the middle. And if you look at this, he slid over a copy of the original ledger from Cedar Bluff. You'll see a name scratched out beneath mine, a name added later, Mr. Delancey's. Judge Harrow peered at it, frowning deeply now. Who gave you access to this ledger? Public record, Eli said. Wasn't locked. Curtis shifted. For the first time, something like unease crossed his face. The judge leaned back. Forgery, tampering with government records, misuse of financial authority, these are not minor claims. He looked at Sheriff Briggs. Bring me the original ledger. I want a full investigation into these filings. Now. Briggs hesitated, then nodded. The room went quiet, then a few claps, then more. Curtis backed away from the bench like a man suddenly aware the floor beneath him wasn't solid anymore. As the crowd spilled into the street, buzzing with talk, Eli stayed behind. He touched the edge of Maybelle's map and whispered, "We're not done yet, darling, but we're getting close." The courthouse door hadn't even cooled from the crowd's exit when Sheriff Briggs returned, ledger in hand, his jaw tight. He laid it down in front of Judge Harrow like it burned. "It's true," Briggs said. "The original page was altered. I compared it to the backup copy stored in Prescott. Rawlins was the rightful owner, and Delancey's name was added months ago. Ink doesn't lie." The judge's eyes narrowed behind round spectacles. "Then we have ourselves a case of fraud and document tampering, possibly conspiracy to defraud the land office." Curtis Delancey, still standing in the center aisle, didn't say a word. His face was pale now, his smug posture wilted like an overheated daffodil. No more smirks, no more speeches, just the silent unraveling of a man used to having his way. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. "Curtis Delancey, you're under arrest for falsifying public records, misrepresentation of land ownership, and attempted fraudulent seizure of property." "You can't be serious," Curtis snapped, voice sharp now. "I'm the legal trustee of First Territorial." "You were," Harrow corrected. "We'll be sending word to the Territorial Banking Commission." Briggs pulled out the cuffs and latched them around Curtis's wrists. "Fancy suit won't get you out of this one." As the sheriff led Curtis away, murmurs rose again through the town square. People leaned from storefronts, wagons, and windows to see the man who once rode through like he owned the place now being marched through the dust like any common thief. Eli watched, quiet. His hands were at his sides, his shoulders straight, but his eyes held something deeper. Not triumph exactly, something closer to justice long delayed. Martha came up beside him, arms folded, lips tight in a proud sort of way. "Well," she said, "he sure didn't ride out the way he rode in." Eli gave the faintest smile. Funny how the dust always settles the same, no matter how shiny the boots. A few feet away, Tomas stood still, his hat clutched in both hands, gaze fixed on the horizon. "He'll be back," he said softly. "Maybe not him, but another one just like him." Eli nodded. "Then we'll be ready." In the days that followed, things in Sagebrush Bend shifted like a slow wind change. Sheriff Briggs, quietly, without fanfare, resigned his post. Some say it was guilt. Others said he finally saw who he'd been protecting. Either way, no one protested. Tomas was offered partial return of his old land, enough to graze a few head and rebuild a simple home. He took it with humility, tipping his hat to Eli as if they'd both been handed something more than property. And Martha? She stood before the school board with a petition signed by over 40 townsfolk, requesting a new grant for books and supplies. It passed in a single vote. By the end of the week, children were running through her schoolhouse door with brand new slates under their arms. One afternoon, a letter arrived addressed to Eli. It bore the seal of the Arizona Territorial Office. He opened it slowly, unfolding the thick paper with careful fingers. A single line caught his breath. "The homestead at Parcel 4B is officially recognized as protected under revised Arizona territory law due to verified water rights and fraudulent claims reversed." It was done. Maybelle's land, his land, safe. Eli stood on his porch that evening, boots resting on the rail, watching the spring-fed creek cut through green pasture. The cattle looked fat again, the mule content. The barn frame was going up slow but steady, with neighbors stopping by to lend a hand without being asked. As the stars blinked awake over Sagebrush Bend, Eli lit a lantern and sat by the window. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't ride in on a horse or carry a badge. Sometimes it came in the shape of a letter, a new roof beam, or the smell of a schoolhouse full of children. But it was here now. The spring flowed clear now, gurgling softly through the rocks and spilling into the new trough Eli had carved with Harold's help. It wasn't much to look at. Rough-hewn wood, held together with nails older than the mule, but it held water. Honest water. Water that ran because it belonged to the land. And now, finally, the land belonged right back to Eli. He stood beside it that morning, hands resting on his hips, watching the light dance across the surface. The cattle gathered nearby, calmer now, healthier. The pasture, once brittle and burnt from drought, was coming back to life in patches of soft green. Maybelle's wildflowers, the ones she planted along the fence line before she passed, had started to bloom again. Orange, yellow, and pale purple. Like she was leaving a sign just to say, "You did good, cowboy." Eli turned when he heard footsteps behind him. Martha stood at the gate, a covered basket in one hand, her apron fluttering in the breeze. She wasn't in her usual school dress. No chalk smudges, no books tucked under one arm, just a pale blue skirt and a worn smile. "You're not rebuilding alone again, are you?" she called, eyebrow raised. "I'm trying not to," Eli said with a slow grin. "Hard habit to break." "Well, you better break it today," she said, handing him the basket. "Peach pie, still warm. Kids at school insisted we bake you something." He lifted the lid, the scent hitting him like memory. "Smells like hope." "Or too much cinnamon," she teased. They sat together on the edge of the porch, feet swinging just above the dirt. No hurry, no fear. "Tomas is setting fence down by his west border," Eli said. "Said he might take in 2 strays from the orphan train coming through. Claims he's too old for it. But I think he just doesn't want to eat alone anymore." Martha smiled, soft and knowing. Funny how the right kind of fire can wake something back up in a man. Eli nodded. He's not the only one. The barn wasn't finished yet, but it stood taller than before. The community had come out in full. Judson brought wood, Harold offered tools, even the Murphy boys hammered nails until their arms gave out. No one asked for anything in return. It was just what folks did when they remembered what it meant to be neighbors. As the breeze picked up, Eli glanced toward the ridge. No riders today, no shadows waiting on horseback, just the wind moving through the grass and the soft sound of water flowing free. "I got a letter from Prescott yesterday," Eli said. "They're offering to pay a small compensation for damages. Said it's part of a restitution fund. Guess Curtis's fall rattled more cages than we thought." "You gonna take it?" Martha asked. "I reckon so," Eli replied. "Not for me, but the school could use a new roof." Martha looked over at him, her voice quiet now. "You ever think maybe it wasn't just about keeping your land? Maybe it was about reminding all of us what it means to stand for something?" He didn't answer right away, just watched the mule wander near the creek, flicking her tail in the sun. "I don't know what it was," he said, "but I know I ain't leaving it behind." She nodded, pulling the pie closer and slicing 2 generous pieces. "Good, 'cause I brought forks." They ate in silence, broken only by the birds and the creak of the porch swing. And when the last bite was gone, Eli set the plate down, turned to Martha with a crooked smile and said, "Reckon we got more than water rights now, darlin'. If you believe one honest man can still make a difference, no matter how small the town or how long the odds, hit that subscribe button and share this tale with a fellow cowboy at heart. Because out here, grit don't rust, and quiet victories still matter."